Hi everyone, my name is Nuria and this is my sewing journey, and for today's video I'm going to show you how to make these trousers. I'm going to show you all the steps on how to draft this design and then how to put it together and how to sew it. So let's start with the drafting. The one thing you're going to need is one of your trouser foundations. I'm going to be using the Culottes foundation and I'm going to link the video down below on how to draft it. But if you don't have it, you can use any other foundations. The trousers, the slacks, the jeans, whatever you want. Even if you don't have a foundation, you can just trace a pair of trousers that works for you, and there you go, you have your foundation. If you use another foundation, I'm going to show you how to add a little bit more flair to make it into a culottes or a wide leg type of trousers. And even with the culottes, I'm going to show you how to change it into some palazzo pants, which means that they're going to have way more flair. So let's get into it. Let's get started with this pattern. For this design, I'm going to be using the Culottes foundation, like I told you, but technically you can use any foundation you want. So for example, if you would like to use the slacks or the jeans, what I would do would be putting them next to each other and then drawing a perpendicular line from the crotch line or from the hip line down, and this would give an illusion of a wide leg line. Here I have an example. On the right I did the pattern with the culottes, and on the left I did the same pattern with the jeans and just drawing these perpendicular lines down. So just choose the one you prefer. The culotte foundation is very big, so I'm going to divide the front and the back, and we're going to start with the front. This is our foundation and I'm going to do it here because I want to leave some space to draw later all the pockets and all the facing for the pockets. The first step we're going to do is just mark all the lines on this paper. Now in this drawing we're using the culotte foundation, but if you're looking for even more flair on the legs and you're looking for a palazzo type of pant, what you're going to do is remove that dart that we have here. So we're just basically going to create a line that goes down through, imagine that I have my whole culottes, and I'm going to cut through it and cut through the dart. I would put this in the same place and remove this dart. And what this is going to do is add flair. You see this here? It would add more flair the lower you go. I'm not going to do that in here because I don't have enough space on my paper, but just so you know that you have this option. The first thing you're going to do is decide how low you want your waistline. For me, I'm okay with this. This is a mid-rise type of pants, but you can do it lower or higher, whatever you want. From there, we're going to define our waistband. My waistband is going to be 4 centimeters wide, but you can make it as wide as you want, and you just mark this all the way. Now with this dart here, you can do two things. You can either leave it here and just close it when you're sewing, or if you don't have much of a difference, you can also remove it from the front. For this video, I'm going to leave the dart because it makes it easier for me to explain. The next thing I'm going to do is define my pockets. Now we're going to have a side pocket, so it's going to have 4 different pieces. Let's start with the opening. For me, the opening is going to be 16.5 centimeters wide because that gives me enough length to fit my hand twice, so it's comfortable. And it's going to be 4.5 centimeters inwards. We create a line that connects it. And then we have to account for the facing, so we don't see the lining fabric inside, but we just see all our main fabric. For this, we're just going to go 3.575 centimeters in. And we're going to create a parallel line from the line that we created before. So we just drag it. It doesn't have to be super perfect, just enough that we cover that lining. Now that we have the opening, let's talk about how big we want our pocket to be. I like my pocket to be 30 centimeters long because then I can fit my phone in it. But you can make it as big as you want. And then I'm going to create a shape that goes until the center front. And at the center front is going to be 10 centimeters long. So from here, and we just create the shape by eye. Like I told you, this pocket has 2 parts. It's going to have the main pocket, then the top part of the pocket is going to have the backing, and it's going to have the facing. So these are going to be 4 different pieces that we'll have to mark on the side. So I'll leave them here for now. And as you can see, for these 2 ones, we have that dart that we didn't remove before. And we are going to have to remove it because otherwise it's going to look weird if we add too much fabric here. So how I'm going to do it is how we did it before to add the flare. I'm just going to create a straight line down. I'm going to cut through that line. And then I'm going to copy this pocket with that flared removed. So I'm going to transfer this pocket here without that dart. And now you can see we have this, so we just smoothen the piece. And this one is going to be our pocket lining top. And then we'll have to do exactly the same for the pocket lining bottom. Now we're almost done with the front. The only thing that we have left to do is creating the fly. The fly, I like to do it 4 centimeters wide, and you make it as long as your zipper plus 1.5 centimeters. My zipper, for example, is 15 centimeters, so that means that I would do 16.5 centimeters. And then you just create this curve here at the end. And that's it. And then to accompany this fly, we're going to create the shield that is going to go on the other front. And the shield is going to be double this width, so 8 centimeters. And the length of the shield is going to be our zipper plus 2.5 centimeters, which means our zipper was 15 centimeters. So this one is going to be 17.5 centimeters long. Now I told you this is the front, and there's one piece that we haven't looked into yet, which is the waistband. And what I'm going to do is I cut these 2 pieces because we'll have to remove the dart, and we're going to use them later on when I work for the back to remove this dart and create a curved waistband. So for now we keep these 2 pieces for later, and let's make sure that we mark what side it is so that I know this is the center front and this is the center side. And now let's mark all these pieces that we need. So let's start with the front. The shield, the facing, the backing, the pocket bottom, and the pocket top. One last thing we have to do is add all the seam allowances. For this pattern I'm going to add 1 centimeter seam allowances everywhere except for the fly and the hem of the pants. That is going to be 2 centimeters, and for the fly it's going to be 0. And I'm also going to write down how many pieces I need to cut from which fabric, but I'll explain this later once we get into the sewing. And sorry, I forgot to tell you that you also need to mark all the notches, which are going to be really helpful for you to sew and put the pattern pieces together. And there we have the front. Now let's look into the back. Now that we're done with the front, let's look into the back. I'm going to start it here to have enough space to add the rest of the things. So again, the first thing we're going to do is just trace our basic foundation. And like I said before, if you want to add more flare, you can get rid of the darts or not. For me, I'm going to leave them there because I don't have enough space. Now that we've traced the pattern, we're going to follow exactly the same procedure as we did for the front. So if you lowered your waistline, you do that again here, but I'm going to leave it in this natural waistline. Then we're going to remove our waistband. For me, it was 4 centimeters, so I just mark it all the way. And for this pattern, I'm going to create a yoke, and I'm going to do that because I want to remove these 2 darks. To create the yoke, we're going to mark here 2.5 centimeters and here 7.5 centimeters. This is going to be our yoke. For now, I leave it like that. And what I'm interested in is removing these darts. This is the part that we didn't do for the front, but you can do it the same way. So what you do is just measure how big these darts are, and you remove it from here. So for me it's going to be 0.75 centimeters, and I just create this new curve here. Now let's talk about the yoke. The yoke has 3 parts, and what we want to do is remove these darts. So that's why I cut these 3 pieces, and we're going to bring them together, and we're just going to put them next to each other so they create this kind of shape. And we're going to trace those shapes, and then from there we're going to smoothen the curves to make it nicer and smoother. And there we have the yoke. Now another thing we're going to have at the back is going to be a back pocket. I'm going to show you first where we're going to place that pocket, and this is 3 centimeters below from your yoke and 2.5 centimeters from the front of the yoke. And then we create the line, and you can basically place the pocket wherever you want it. I would advise you to put it in the middle, but it's a science in itself and it changes the shape of your buttock, so just take a look at it and look at what you like. And to draft our pocket, first we're going to make a rectangle of 15 by 15 centimeters, and I'm going to divide it halfway. Then we're going to go down 2 centimeters here, and that's going to be the edge of our pocket. And I want to make this bottom line smaller, and it's going to be 10 centimeters long instead of 15 centimeters long. And now we just draw our pocket. Of course, this is a standard pocket, so if you want to make it bigger or smaller, go ahead. Now the last thing is going to be creating the waistband. Remember that we separated those pieces at the front? We have to do exactly the same for the back, and I'm going to mark the center back and the side back. If you remember, these ones were the ones for the front. So now what we have to do is just like we did with the yoke, we connect the pieces, and that's going to create a curved waistband. So we get this here, this is the center front, we connect it through where the dart would be, but we're eliminating that dart. Then we're going to add the side back to the side front. We're going to add this piece here, and finally the center back piece. And now, like we did with the yoke, we're going to trace all these little pieces. This is my preferred way to drafting a curved waistband, but of course you can just measure your distance at the front and at the back on the waistline and just create a random curve, but I don't like that because we have this and it's way more accurate. And just like we did with the yoke, we're going to smoothen all these curves here, so we create a nice transition. And then we mark the center back and the center front. I also like to mark where the transitions are going to be as notches, so then it's easier to sew on later on. Now one last thing, if you remember, for the center front we added the fly, and we have to account for that. So what we're going to do is we're going to extend this, the amount of the fly, so 4 centimeters. This waistline is cut on the fold, and this part here is only needed for one of the sides. I like to cut it for both sides because it makes it easier if later on I just miscalculated or something and I need extra fabric. But just so you know that this is going to be too long for your trousers. And now that we have all these pieces, we just mark them. First the back, and I'm also going to mark the notches where the main lines are to make it easier later on to attach front and backs together and make sure that they are the same length. Then we have the yoke, then we have the back pocket, and finally we have the waistband. And one last thing is adding again the seam allowances. I'm going to add seam allowances of 1 centimeter everywhere except for the center back of the waistband because it's going to be cut on the fold, and the top of the pocket that is going to be 2 centimeters, and the hem of the pants that is also going to be 2 centimeters. And then finally, I'm going to add how many pieces I need to cut from which fabric, but I will go more into detail once we get into the cutting of the fabric. And just like that, we have all the back pieces and all the front pieces, so let's cut them. And we're done with the drafting, and you should have right now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different pieces. This pattern has 10 different pieces if I don't include the fly, which I'm not including. And one thing I haven't said is that I added 1 centimeter seam allowances because I plan on just having a normal seam. But if you're planning on doing flat fell seams, for example, then you should add 1.5 centimeter seam allowances. So be aware that if you follow this video, these are the seams that I'm going to be doing. And that's why I added these seam allowances. So without further ado, let's look into how to sew this design. To sew this design, you're going to need for sure a sewing machine, of course. To make this pattern, you're going to need some interfacing, lining fabric for the pockets, and then your main fabric. You're also going to need some scissors, some erasable markers. These are my favorite. They go away with heat. Some pins, and of course, this is my favorite tool ever, the snippets. For this tutorial, I'm going to be using muslin fabric, and it's just 100% cotton. I'm using this fabric because I'm making it in scale, so they're gonna be smaller than normal, and there's no point in wasting expensive fabric to do this. But depending on the fabric you're going to be using, you're going to need different thread and different needles. When I say needles, I mean the ones that go on the machine. If you're using, for example, denim, I would definitely go for needles that are for denim, but for this one I'm just going to use universal ones because they go well with everything. And the same stands for the thread. If you're going to use normal fabric, you can use normal 100% polyester thread. But if you're working with denim, you might want to use some thicker thread. Some other things you're going to need. This is the most important one, and it's the iron. You 100% need this. This might look horrible, but if you press your seam flats, it's going to look gorgeous. And the last thing you're going to need, but this one is optional, is your overlocker machine. I'm going to be using it just because I think if you are an experienced sewist and you want to make these trousers as well as you can, then you might have these at home. But if you don't have it, don't worry. You don't need to overlock any seams or do anything. Or if you want to add nice finishes, which I would do, let me tell you, you can just use a zigzag stitch. Whenever I say overlock, you just zigzag stitch. And now that we know all these things, let's get into the sewing. We're going to start by cutting the main fabric. What I like to do before starting is give it a good press so it's nice and flat, but for now I'm not going to do it. If you don't fully understand how fabric works, here you have the cut edge. It's the edge where they cut the fabric for me and the threads are loose. And then you have the selvage of the fabric, which is the other side, so they are connected through this corner. And all the threads are into place, so they are not going to fall. This means that if we follow the selvage of the fabric, this is the grain of the fabric. So we're going to cut the pieces that way. So we're going to start by cutting the front and the back, and we need to cut them twice mirrored. So I'm going to cut them like this first, and then like this. If you look at the front, it has the fly here, and you only need to cut the fly on one side. You can decide which is the side that you prefer, but for me, I'm going to do the front. I'm going to cut the fly, and when I do it like this, I'm going to remove the fly. Now, when I say remove the fly, here we have this line that is the center front, so I need to add the 1 centimeter seam allowance. So don't forget to do that when you remove the fly. So I'm going to cut 2 of the front and 2 of the back mirrored. I'm going to cut 2 of the main pocket mirrored, 2 of the backing mirrored, 2 of the facing mirrored, 2 of the yoke mirrored, 1 shield. And then for the waistband, you remember that I told you that I'm going to cut it on the fold. So what we're going to do here is we're going to fold the fabric halfway, and I'm going to put this here, and I'm going to cut 2 on the fold. So this center back needs to be aligned with the fold of the fabric. The next fabric we need to cut is the lining fabric for the pockets. And we need to cut 2 pocket linings top and 2 pocket linings bottom, mirrored. The last thing we're going to need is the interfacing. The interfacing is used to add structure, and we need a couple of pieces. We need 2 backings, 2 facings, 1 shield, and 2 waistbands cut in the fold. So if we add all the pieces, we have 2 fronts, one with the fly and one without the fly. We have 2 pieces of each pocket, and the backing and the facing have interfacing. Then we have the shield with interfacing. We have the 2 yokes, the 2 back pieces also cut mirrored, 2 pockets also cut mirrored, 2 of the waistbands in the main fabric cut on fold, and 2 cut in interfacing. And then we have the interfacing for the fly. Those are all the pieces you need, so let's get into the sewing. Step number 1 is going to be interfacing all the pieces that need interfacing. So we just match all of them together, and we're going to iron them into place. The first thing we're going to do are the pockets. If you remember, we had 4 different pieces. We had the lining bottom, the backing, the lining top, and the facing. And the truth is that the backing goes with the lining bottom and the facing goes with the lining top. And we have these pieces mirrored. So the first thing we're going to do is overlock this side of the backing and the facing. And once it is overlocked, we just pair every pocket with where it belongs. And we're going to run a stitch over the overlocked edge to make sure it stays into place. I'm going to be using black thread because then it's easier to see, but feel free to use whatever thread color you want. The next step for the pockets is going to be to attach the top lining to the front piece, but before we have to do that, we need to close this dart that, if you remember, we left it here. So we go on the wrong side and we close that dart. And we're going to have to close it following this line. And it's very important that you do not do back stitching here at the edge of the dart. So how it's going to work, we leave 2 threads here, we open it and we finish it with a little knot. We cut the excess and we're going to press this dart towards the center front. And now that we have it pressed, we're ready to attach the pocket to the front panel. To do that, we're going to turn this around. So as you can see, this is the wrong side because here we have the interfacing and the dart. So we're going to turn this, and this is the right side. And we're going to take the pocket that has the backing here, and we have to match the one that goes with right sides together. So this is the right side. So that means that this is not the correct one. This is going to be the correct one, and we go right with right sides. And we're going to sew along this line with 1 centimeter seam allowance. So now we sewed along this line, and now what we're going to do is we're going to press the seams flat here with this extra seam on the side of the pocket. And now that we've pressed the seams flat, we're going to run a stitch here 1 millimeter away from the edge to make sure that this stays on this side. And now that we have this line here, we just press it this way. And now that we've pressed it, we turn it around, and now it's time to find the side of the pocket that goes with this one, and we're going to attach again right sides together. So this is the right side, this is the right side, so I put right sides together. And I'm going to sew and overlock along the edges. And that's it. Here we have the overlocked edge and the seam, and this is how it looks like from the front. One thing I like to do is attaching this with some stitches and also attaching this side with some stitches to make sure that it stays in place. But for the rest, we're gonna do exactly the same with the other front. And now, as you can see, we have both pockets at the front. The next step is going to be doing the fly. For that, the first thing I'm going to do is overlock all this crotch line and also the fly. And once we have overlocked these edges, we're going to put right sides together and we're going to pin along the crotch line. And I'm going to sew along the crotch line until a little bit into the fly. And once we've sewn along that line, we're going to open it and we're going to press these seams flat. And we're also going to press this fly inwards and this seam inwards. And now we can see that all the seams have been pressed open. And at the front is going to look a little bit like this. Now we're going to get the shield and we're going to fold it with wrong sides together, and we're going to press it flat and do an overlock stitch around the edges. So just like this. And now we have to look into our trousers. Here is the fly and here we have the seam. So that means that the shield is going to be placed towards the fly like this, which means that when we have our zipper, have into account that all my pieces are in scale, but the zipper is not in scale, so that's why it looks huge here. But I want to place the zipper on the overlocked edge like this, and I'm going to secure the zipper on this side only. This is the normal foot we have on our machine, but when I want to attach the zipper, this is going to be really complicated because it just doesn't work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the foot, and I'm going to be using this one. I like to open the zipper a little bit, then I put it into place. You can hold it with some pins and you start sewing. So now we have the trousers, again with the fly on this side and the seam here. We have our zipper, and what we have to do is attach the zipper to the side that doesn't have the fly. So I'm going to put it here. I'm going to line it up on the waistline, and I'm going to attach it with pins. And now we're going to run a stitch on this side to attach it together. This is how it's going to look like with this seam here. And now it's time to attach it to the other side. So to do that, I'm going to add the fly side on top, and I'm going to secure it with some basting stitches. So this is how it's going to look like, more or less. And now we go to the other side. So if we look at it, this is the shield, this is the zipper, and this is the fly. And we only have to add these two together. So I'm going to put them like this, attach them with pins, and sew a stitch here, only getting the fly and the zipper. And now this has been attached, and the last thing you can do, this is optional if you want, you know that all the trousers normally have a fly here marked with some stitches. You can do that, but it's very important that when you do it, you have this shield on the other side, because if you catch it, then you won't be able to open your fly. So you're going to secure the shield on the other side. You are going to take your pen and you're going to draw your fly, and then you're going to run a stitch all the way like this, and this is going to secure your fly on the inside. So just like this, and if you want, now you can release your shield. You can put it to the other side, so on this side, and then do a couple of stitches here to secure the shield so it doesn't always open, so it's only attached here at the bottom. If you want to do stitches, we're gonna choose our zigzag stitch, which for me is the C, and I'm gonna have here around 2.5 and a low one here below 1. We're gonna add this wherever we want to add this zigzag stitch, and first I like to start seeing if I like the size of it. This size is perfect, and press. And now we're ready to take these basting stitches off, and that's it. There you have your fly. And now that we're done with the front, we're going to continue with the back pockets. First thing I'm going to do is pressing flat the seam allowances. For that, I have this little tool here that tells me the centimeters, but you can just do it by eye or marking it with a marker if that's how it works best for you. So on the top, I fold it once and I fold it again. And then I'm also going to fold all this with the seam allowances. And there you go, you have the pockets. Now I'm going to hide these things that are appearing here, and I'm going to run 2 stitches on top of the pocket. And here we have the back piece, and if you remember, we created this line here to show us where the pocket placement is going to be. So I'm going to transfer this to my fabric. And now I'm going to get my pocket and I'm going to place it wherever I see fit. And then I'm going to run 2 stitches here, one on the border and another one on top. So in the end it's going to look like this, and we're going to do exactly the same with the other back. And now that we have both pockets, it's time to attach the yoke. The yoke is going to be like this, so the long part goes to the center back and the short one to the side. We're going to go with right sides together and we're going to attach it all the way to the end. And now I'm going to run a straight stitch all the way here with 1 centimeter seam allowance. And once I'm done with this seam, I'm going to overlock the edge here. Just like this. And now we're going to press the seams like that with this raw edge towards the yoke and run a stitch on top of it to secure the raw edges. And just like that, we have one side and the other side. So the next step is going to be overlocking these crotch lines for the back. And now that we have them overlocked, we're going to put right sides together, one over the other one, and we're going to attach it with pins. And we're going to sew along this line with 1 centimeter seam allowances. And once we have this line, we're going to open and press the seams flat again. And now we have front and back. And we're reaching the end. The one thing we have to do is we put front and then the back on top with right sides together. And we're going to pin along the sides and the inseam. And once you have it all pinned, you're going to sew with 1 centimeter seam allowances on both sides and also on the inseam. And aside from that, I'm also going to overlock the raw edges. And here we have it with all the seams done and finished with the overlock. Now I'm going to give it a good press and we're going to continue with the waistband. Okay, so we're on to the last step. We have the waistband pieces here, both of them interfaced. Not everyone interfaces both of them, but I like to interface both because it gives me more sturdiness. And what we're going to do is make sure that we have all the notches transferred. And once we have all the notches transferred, we're going to put right sides together. So the right side is the one that does not have the interfacing. I'm going to put right sides together and I'm going to sew along the top edge. We're going to press these seams open. And then we're going to fold it like this and we're going to press it again. And now we have reached the moment where I prove to you why the notches are important. So this is the wrong side of our trousers. We're going to turn them right sides towards us. We're going to open the zipper and we're going to get our waistband. And we're going to match these notches that we created with where they belong. So the center back, the side seam. Here we have the shield, so it's going to be all the way. And this side is the one that I was telling you about, that we don't need to cut the whole thing. So this is the notch for center front and this is the center front. So I'm just going to match this notch here. And I'm going to make sure that the waistband is attached properly everywhere and I'm going to run a stitch around it. And there is multiple ways to finishing a waistband, but I'm going to show you an easy method. And what you have to do now is overlock or cover this seam here at the top. So if you look at it, this is what we just attached and this is the second piece of your waistband. This edge here, we overlock it. This is how we have our trousers now. It looks a little bit like a mess, but it's basically we have the waistband here. And what we want to do is just finish it like this, right? But to do that, we have to finish this properly. So how we're going to do that is we're going to put both pieces of the waistband right sides together, and we're going to sew along this line here. So I'm going to create a line to make it easier for myself. I'm going to sew along this line, and we're going to do the same on the other side. And now we're going to have all these excess that I'm just going to trim, and I'm going to also trim along this edge. So it stays like this, and then we're ready to turn our work. I like to help myself with some scissors to bring the edge out. And the same for this one. And now the last thing we have to do is make sure that this is attached properly. So we're going to press these seams towards the inside, and we're going to cover them with our waistband. And I ask you to overlock it because this edge is going to be seen. So we're going to run a stitch all the way like this to make sure it stays in place. Just like that. And look at these cute little pants. And as you can see, it's attached to the inside. And now the two things that we have left to do is one, the button. I'm not going to show you how to do the button because I don't know if you want the button or if you want to add one of those things that you just close it and you cannot see anything here. One thing I forgot about this pattern was to add the belt loops, so it's not here, but if you go to my website I give you the measurements for the belt loops. And then the last thing to do is the hem. Step number one is going to be turning the pants inside out. And now, like we did with the pocket, we just have to bring 1 centimeter seam allowance in. Again, I'm using this magical tool, but it's just 1 centimeter seam allowance. And once you're done with this 1 centimeter seam allowance, you fold it again because we added 2 centimeter seam allowances. And once you're done with this, we run a stitch at the top, and that's it. And it should look like something like this. And just like that, we have a beautiful pair of culottes without a button, because this is the Nuria Mo style. Look how cute. They're so cute, oh my god. But that's everything for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you make them, let me know, please. I also have the instructions on how to draft this pattern more as a schematic view on my website. I'll link it down below, and I'll see you hopefully next week with another pattern. Oh, and if you want to see specific designs, please let me know and follow me on Instagram. My handle is _NuriaMo. And now that's everything for today. See you next one. Bye.